Heavy gunfire in Somali capital as row over election delay escalates. Government forces and opposition fighters have exchanged heavy gunfire in Somalia's capital, Mogadishu, as a row over delays to elections has escalated. President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud's term in office ended on May 15th, but was extended by a year. The opposition said this was unconstitutional and called for protests on Thursday. Gunfire was reported in several neighborhoods of the capital and persisted throughout the night, according to accounts by residents. Police said they were conducting a large-scale security operation against heavily armed militias who launched mortar attacks in some areas. Somalia last held a one-person, one-vote election in 1969 and has been ravaged by civil war for more than 30 years. Former Prime Minister Hassan Ali Kura said he had been attacked by government forces while he and other leaders were preparing for Thursday's peaceful demonstrations. The responsibility for any casualties or damage resulting from this incident lies with the president whose term has expired, he said on X. This attack is a grave assault on the constitutional rights of Somali citizens and a deliberate attempt to suppress peaceful assembly, he added. A resident told the Reuters news agency that a mortar shell had landed on his neighbor's house and injured a mother. A big house near us is also ablaze. Mortars and other weapons landed on it, Ahmed Ismail told the agency on Thursday morning. The number of casualties is not yet known, and the president has not commented. In statement on X, former President Sharif Sheikh Ahmed, an ally of Kura, said the opposition would not be intimidated. If the president and his soldiers think that we are afraid or that we will flee, we are not going to run away, he said. The protests have not taken place amid the fighting. The capital is now largely calm, although sporadic gunfire can still be heard in some districts. Somalia's Civil Aviation Authority denied reports that the violence had disrupted flights, assuring passengers that operations at the city's airport remain normal. All scheduled flights today at Adenada Airport are operating as planned, with no cancellations, the authority said in a statement. The U.S. Embassy in Mogadishu has described the violence as reckless, adding that leaders on all sides have a responsibility to preserve stability and resolve differences through peaceful means. Regional bloc IGAD condemned all acts of violence and urged parties to exercise restraint and pursue dialogue to resolve their differences, while the European Union delegation in Somalia urged leaders to prioritize national interests and find a consensus on an election roadmap in the interest of the Somali people. Mohamud was elected by parliament in 2022, defeating then-President Mohamed Abdullahi Mohamed, better known by his nickname Farmajo. He had served a previous term as president in 2012 to 2017, which was dominated by the struggle against al-Shabaab jihadists, who still control many parts of the country. Following the expiry of the president's term, the federal government and the opposition started talks but did not reach an agreement. Mohamud has been attempting to move Somalia towards democratic elections, replacing a system in which clan elders choose MPs, who in turn select a president. The opposition disagrees on how direct elections should be conducted and rejects the constitutional amendment in March extending the presidency by a year.
7. We move on to this story, and that is in Somalia's capital, Mogadishu. Government forces and opposition fighters have exchanged heavy gunfire as a row over delays on upcoming elections escalates. President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud's term in office ended last month on the 15th, but was extended by a year, with the opposition saying this is unconstitutional, and they called for protests on Thursday. Gunfire has been reported in several neighborhoods of the capital. To speak about the latest developments, Dr. Tendai Mbanje, governance and elections expert at the University of Pretoria, joins us now on the line. So now, at what point does this political dispute become a conflict risk? Because we know that Somalia has been a country in conflict, but just has it crossed a very important threshold now with this?
I think the conflict, to some extent, is getting out of hand. It's getting out of hand because of distrust in the new electoral system that the president is trying to bring. I think opposition leaders, they feel this as a way for the incumbents to get advantage. There is resistance to move from a clan-based voting system to a direct presidential election. And I think it has not been communicated properly. The messaging around the migration or the introduction of the new voting system or the attempts has not been received well. So you see that opposition is united in resisting or in as a force of resistance for this new electoral based system that the president is attempting to bring. But also at the heart of this is that the president does not have much bargaining powers, because his mandate expired on 15 May.
In terms of what concerns you, is it the constitutional dispute itself, or the fact that it seems that the warring parties, so to speak, are willing to settle the disagreements through armed conflict?
I think it's deeper than that. It's deeper than that in the sense that if it was issue of just the constitutional deadlock, I think they could be talking about the dates of election. But right now, what they are doing is that the opposition, they totally rejecting the mandate, and they seeing every action being done by the president as unconstitutional. Because so I think it's also the total rejection of the person of the president, in the sense that he's seen to be trying to introduce something that will put incumbency advantage and the advantage of the political elites around him.
So let's look at the politicals and its surroundings. So if opposition leaders are claiming that they're preparing for peaceful demonstrations, what message does it send for security forces and those who are aligned to the opposition when they end up exchanging in capital gunfire? I'm just trying to look at the environment within which these politics takes place and these disagreements, because there have been discussions to ensure that Somalia is ready to hold elections. Does that speak to the fact that this is not effective?
Yes, obviously the opposition, they are speaking about them having peaceful marches and so forth. But at the same time, yesterday we heard that there were shootings by the members of the security forces at the former Prime Minister's house when they were actually planning these peaceful demonstrations. So there's no guarantee that these demonstrations are going to be peaceful. But also the one thing is that Somalia is a highly militarized, highly securitized environment. So what you then question around the peaceful demonstrations is, what are the security guarantees? I think there is no certainty, or there's no assurance from an outside observer that whatever that is being planned, it will turn out to be peaceful, because of the distrust even between the members of the security sector and the opposition figures who are seen to be disrupting or destabilizing the state.
And I guess the question also is, what is more damaging for Somalia going forward? Is it an opposition that rejects the mandate that is being presented by President Hassan Sheikh Mohammed, as in an elite that is intransigent, or is it Al-Shabaab? What is more dangerous for a fledgling democracy, if they so hope to have one?
I think then in this case it becomes a multi-layered challenges. Of course, it is Al-Shabaab still controls large segment of the population, and often we have seen that Al-Shabaab, when there is some form of instability politically, they take advantage. So what you're going to say is that if the tensions between the opposition and the ruling party or the government continues, it will then give room for Al-Shabaab to come in and to also further destabilize. So there'll be a multi-layer challenges posed here. So all these challenges, they will all culminate in a more destabilized Somalia due to, I think, since 1969, when they introduced this clan-based voting system, there have been concerns by minority groups feeling excluded. Also, there's very few, there's also, these groups are also armed. So we will see that if the tensions are not resolved, there will be a multi-layered, the conflict will become even more complex, and you having several groups fighting each other and also fighting the government. But most worrisome is the Al-Shabaab group that is willing and is always ready to take an opportunistic moment to further destabilize the nation.
And I just also want to look at the added complication of federalism while trying to achieve state building. I mean, you want to have a central authority with regional autonomy, but at the same time, is the problem not the fact that there are federal member states who feel that the distribution of power is not adequate?
Yes, they've always the system itself has always had problems because particularly minority groups who have the chance to have arms, feeling that the system, their voices are not heard. So this federal system, while it has worked and have challenges, they even fear further that if they move to a presidential election, they will be significantly wiped out of influence or out of representation.
Okay, then let's look at the mediation standpoint. What are the core issues then that must be resolved? First, the election timetable, the question of political, or rather presidential legitimacy, or the restoration of trust between the political actors. Which of them should be paramount at this point?
I think they all are equally valid on the table. But the first standpoint is that the opposition is rejecting the mandate, the expired mandate of the president, and that it was unconstitutionally extended with a year, which they have a ground to contest that. And then, so that becomes a conversation to say when earliest elections could be held, and what's the consensus, and from a viewpoint of mediation to be say, what's the consensus ahead? I was doing some research. I think analysts, experts point to say a drastic move from a clan-based system to a presidential will likely be rejected. Maybe a phased-out process to say. Of course, in earlier on, a few years ago, they did try the direct vote in municipal elections. So a phased-out process whereby they test the new system that they would like to introduce could work. But also, at the end of the day, if it cannot be discussed at the level of political elites, I think it needs to be taken to the people, consultation, civil society, human rights groups, take it to community leaders and so forth, so that it gets endorsed. So from the viewpoint of mediation, I think the first thing that needs to be addressed is the issue of the president's expired mandate, and when earliest election could be held, and then what system should be implemented, a hybrid system or a phased out process, or to a total. Maybe people will still want the clan-based system to continue, which they have a right to do so.
And just in terms of your assessment of the current political order, is it a personality-driven political system, or do you still think there is room to build on what some say is a constitutional order rules-based system?
I think what we see in the president, from my analysis, I would think that he's genuinely want Somalia to move to a democratic system where as institutions that work, it is people that have a direct mandate with the ones that they have a direct social contract with the ones that they elect as their leaders. The clan-based system is very problematic because it's the people that elect clan leaders, and the clan leaders they are the ones that then elect federal leaders and so forth. I think that the clan-based system has always had problems because it's based on personalities. It is based on those who have arms and influence in society, those who can control society to be at the helm of the power. But a direct presidential vote will then address some of those things, will maybe also encourage pluralism. So I think the current system that is being trying to be protected by opposition leaders, it's about personalities. But what the president, whose mandate is expired, he is trying to push constitutional reforms, will encourage pluralism and will democratize Somalia to a better nation, I suppose.
So at this point, what should regional players and some of the democratic support structures in the international arena be doing to help Somali elections happen and ensure that it is within their determined model of their envisioned democratic state?
Ironically, I've seen statements from that the U.S. mission and Somalia, they've issued statements to encourage dialogue, to speak about specifically about the dispute, the issues of dispute. EU mission, they've also encouraging dialogue. I've not seen any from the African Union. But the first thing that the regional partners and players needs to do is to look at the issue, to say there is an expired mandate, but obviously they cannot be a leadership vacuum in Somalia. So what they need to do is to bring the parties at dispute to the table to address the issues, particularly to speak about the timelines, because I think the issue of timelines is more pertinent because the opposition feel that they cannot be ruled by a leader that does not have a mandate with the people. So I think that is the starting bargaining point from the viewpoint of international partners, but also noting that the security of Somalia is the security of the continent. Whenever Somalia is destabilized, there's irregular migration within the East Africa community, and it ends up also spilling to Southern Africa and many other parts of the continent and the world. So the issue of Somalia is not just the issue of Somalia itself. It's not the issue of Horn of Africa. It is the continental peace and security issues, a world issue. It has so many implications to movement of people, the stability of the region, and Al-Shabaab and other linked groups to it may also become more prominent if Somalia become destabilized, and they can also destabilize neighbors as well.
Dr. Tendai Mbanje, thank you very much for your time and your expertise. He's a governance and elections expert at the University of Pretoria, just speaking to us about the latest outbreak of gunfire reported in the streets of Mogadishu as the opposition and government forces differ on the road to the elections. It brings the time to 27 minutes past 7.
They imagined a future.